Hey guys, welcome back to this channel, The Voice of the Past. In this video, we will unfold the untold story of the Mercer family's lost ship, A Curse at Sea, before continuing. If you're new into this channel, please consider subscribing to this channel. Let's start. The Mercer family was known for their immense wealth, powerful fleet, and long-standing legacy in maritime trade. For generations, they controlled trade routes across the Atlantic, amassing treasures beyond imagination. However, with their fortune came a dark legend, one whispered among sailors and feared by those who dared to speak of it. It was said that an ancient curse loomed over the Mercer fleet, tied to a ship known as the Black Harbinger. The story told of a deal made centuries ago when the first Mercer captain, Edwin Mercer, encountered a mysterious woman on the shores of a forgotten island. She had warned him that great riches would come to his family, but at a cost. A ship bearing the Mercer name would one day vanish, and with it, an entire generation. Many dismissed it as superstition, until the fateful voyage of the Lillian's Grace, the largest and most prized ship of the Mercer fleet. A grand departure. In the spring of 1792, Captain Jonathan Mercer, heir to the family empire, prepared for an ambitious journey. His goal was to sail from England to the Caribbean and return with rare spices, silks, and gold. The ship carried his wife, Margaret, their son Edwin, and his younger sister Eleanor. Alongside them were an experienced crew, handpicked by Mercer himself. The docks of Bristol were filled with onlookers as the Lillian's Grace set sail. The ship, with its black and gold-trimmed sails, cut through the waves like a beast of legend. The sky was clear and the sea was calm, a perfect day for departure. Yet, among the crowd, an old sailor watched in silence, his face pale. He muttered, "The curse has chosen its vessel." The first signs of omen. For the first few weeks, the journey was smooth. Spirits were high, and Captain Mercer took pride in his vessel. He spent his nights mapping routes and his days with his family. Young Edwin, only 10 years old, often climbed the mast to look out at the endless blue, dreaming of one day captaining his own ship. Then, strange occurrences began. First, a series of unnerving whispers drifted through the ship at night, low, unintelligible murmurs that no one could explain. The crew dismissed it as the wind, but some began sleeping with knives beneath their pillows. Then, the compass began to falter. No matter how skilled the navigator, their readings were inconsistent. One evening, the first mate, Robert Hale, swore he saw the stars shift unnaturally in the sky, as if the heavens themselves were moving. Then came the fog. A thick, impenetrable mist rolled in one evening without warning. It was unnatural, dense enough that the ship's lanterns barely penetrated a few feet ahead. The ocean fell deathly silent. No waves, no wind, no cries of gulls. The world outside the ship simply ceased to exist. As the crew tried to navigate blindly, a distant bell rang, a deep, echoing toll that sent chills through everyone aboard. There were no churches or ships nearby. The bell was coming from the fog itself. Panic set in. The men spoke in hushed whispers, some murmuring prayers, others gripping their weapons. Eleanor Mercer, usually a voice of reason, admitted feeling an unshakable presence around them. And then, at the stroke of midnight, the lookout cried out, "Ship ahead!" Out of the mist emerged a dark silhouette, a massive vessel with tattered black sails, gliding without oars or wind. A ghost ship. As it drew closer, the crew saw a name etched into its rotting hull: the Black Harbinger, the cursed ship of Mercer legend. The Black Harbinger loomed in the mist like a phantom, its massive frame barely making a sound as it approached. The tattered sails fluttered without wind, and its hull, covered in centuries of decay, seemed almost alive, pulsing with an eerie glow. The air on the Lillian's Grace grew thick, heavy with an unnatural stillness. Captain Jonathan Mercer gripped the ship's wheel, his knuckles white. "Hold steady," he commanded, though his voice wavered. The crew stood frozen, weapons drawn but useless against the unknown. Eleanor, usually composed, felt her breath hitch as she locked eyes with the figures standing aboard the ghostly vessel. Shrouded figures, barely human in appearance, lined the deck of the Black Harbinger. Their faces were obscured beneath the shadows of wide-brimmed hats, their bodies draped in long coats, and their movements eerily smooth, like marionettes controlled by an unseen force. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. He raised a skeletal hand and pointed directly at Captain Mercer. A whisper swept across the deck of the Lillian's Grace, as if a dozen voices were speaking in unison. The debt must be paid. The bell tolled again, sending a tremor through the ship. The air turned ice cold, and the deck beneath them groaned as if something unseen was pressing down upon it. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the Black Harbinger vanished. The mist cleared, the ocean stirred once more, and the stars realigned in the sky. The Lillian's Grace was alone again, but the ship had changed, a fading reality. Over the next few days, strange events plagued the crew. The wood of the ship began to darken, as if aged by centuries overnight. Food spoiled within hours, even in perfect conditions. The ship's clock stopped working, and no matter how often it was reset, it always drifted back to midnight. Worst of all, the crew began to disappear. It started with Robert Hale, the first mate. One morning, his cabin was found empty, his belongings undisturbed. His boots were still by his bed, his pistol fully loaded. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. Then, a deckhand named Thomas Greaves vanished while on night watch. His lantern was found rolling on the deck, the candle still burning. Panic set in. Margaret Mercer pleaded with her husband to turn back, but Jonathan refused. "We're too far now," he reasoned. "We push forward. Whatever this is, we'll break through it." But deep down, even he knew something was very wrong. The curse takes hold. As the days passed, more crew members disappeared, silently, without struggle. There were no screams, no signs of where they had gone. It was as if the ship itself was swallowing them. Eleanor, desperate to understand what was happening, locked herself in the captain's study, going through old Mercer records. She scoured through maps, journals, and letters, searching for anything that could explain the Black Harbinger. That's when she found it. A journal from their great-grandfather, Edwin Mercer. The last entry was written in shaky script, the ink smudged as if written in haste. The sea does not forget. It waits. It claims what is owed. If a Mercer sets sail beyond the threshold, the debt will be taken. One ship, one generation. Eleanor's blood ran cold. They weren't being haunted. They were the sacrifice. At that moment, a deep groan echoed through the ship, a sound so unnatural it sent a shudder through everyone who heard it. The Lillian's Grace was changing. The wood darkened to black, cracks forming along its surface like veins. The sails, once pristine, became tattered. The ship was becoming the Black Harbinger, and then the whispers returned, low, hissing voices calling them one by one. The debt must be paid. Eleanor turned to warn her brother, but Jonathan was gone. The captain had vanished. Panic surged through the Lillian's Grace as the realization struck. Captain Jonathan Mercer was gone. His cabin was undisturbed, his coat still draped over the chair, his charts laid out on the desk. But he was nowhere to be found. Eleanor gripped the edge of the desk, her mind racing. "This is the curse," she whispered. "One by one we're being taken." Her nephew Edwin stood in the doorway, wide-eyed. "Uncle's gone, isn't he?" he asked in a small voice. Eleanor swallowed hard and knelt beside him. "Yes, but we will find him," she promised, though even she wasn't sure if it was possible. Margaret, now a widow in all but confirmation, had fallen into silent despair. She barely spoke, clutching Edwin close as if afraid he would disappear next. Meanwhile, the crew, reduced to half their original number, grew restless. "We must turn back," cried Bosun Jack Turner, his face lined with fear. "And go where?" shouted Henry Lowe, one of the remaining deckhands. "The compass won't hold. The maps are useless. We don't even know where we are." He was right. The Lillian's grace had become adrift in an unmarked sea, a place where no stars guided their path and the ocean stretched into nothingness. Still, Eleanor refused to surrender to fear. "There has to be a way," she muttered, clutching the journal of Elias Mercer. "If the debt is real, then there must be a way to break it." The forbidden name. While searching the ship for answers, Eleanor found herself drawn to the cargo hold, a place most had avoided since the disappearances began. The air there was thick, damp, with something unnatural. There, hidden beneath a pile of rotting crates, she found an old wooden chest, its lock rusted but fragile. With a hard shove, she broke it open. Inside lay a single scroll, its parchment brittle and ink faded with time. The script was Mercer handwriting, unmistakably ancient. It told of a name forbidden among the Mercer lineage, a name that Elias Mercer had once whispered to the wind and regretted ever since: Captain Alistair Cain. The moment Eleanor read the name aloud, the ship lurched violently. Above deck, the wind howled, and the ocean, which had been eerily calm for days, suddenly erupted into violent waves. Something had awakened. A voice from the past. The crew scrambled as the ship was tossed like a rag doll upon the storming sea. Thunder cracked overhead and the sky turned an unnatural shade of green. And then he appeared. At the ship's helm a figure stood, as if he had always been there. Tall and skeletal, dressed in the remnants of a captain's uniform, his face was half-rotted, his eyes nothing but hollow sockets. But somehow Eleanor knew who he was. Alistair Cain, the man whose name should have never been spoken. A captain long lost to time, claimed by the sea, now standing before them as if he had never left. When he spoke, his voice was like the creaking of ancient wood, the whisper of 1,000 drowned voices. The Mercers took what was not theirs. Now the sea takes back what it is owed. Eleanor stepped forward, defiant despite the terror gripping her heart. "You are the debt," she said, realization dawning. "The curse is you." Alistair Cain tilted his head, a grotesque mimicry of amusement. "Not quite," he whispered. "I am the collector." And with that, the deck beneath them split open, a massive crack forming down the center of the ship. Screams filled the air as the sea reached up, clawing for its final victims. And then, one by one, they began to fall. The deck of the Lillian's Grace split apart like a wound, the gaping chasm revealing a swirling abyss of black water beneath. The crew screamed as the ship trembled, the unnatural storm raging above them. Eleanor grabbed onto a railing, holding Edwin close as the ship groaned under the weight of the curse. Margaret, paralyzed by fear, stood near the main mast, her hands gripping the wood so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Alistair Cain, the phantom captain, stood unmoved at the helm, watching his collection unfold. "The sea does not forget," he rasped. "The debt must be paid." One by one, the crew began to fall. Henry Lowe was the first. His scream cut short as the black water swallowed him whole. His body vanished the instant he touched the abyss, as if consumed by the sea itself. Then Jack Turner, who tried to grab onto the rigging but was yanked down by an unseen force, his body sinking without a ripple. It was as if the ocean had no bottom, only endless darkness. Eleanor knew then that this was no natural sea. They were at the edge of something beyond the world. The choice. "There has to be a way out," Eleanor whispered. She turned to Alistair Cain, her heart pounding. "If the debt must be paid, then tell me, what exactly do you want?" Cain tilted his decayed head, a shadow of amusement crossing his skeletal features. "I want what was stolen," he said. "I want the heir of Mercer." "Edwin." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. "No," Margaret sobbed, tightening her grip on her son. "You can't have him." Eleanor's mind raced. The journal had warned of one ship, one generation. But did it have to be Edwin? Could someone else take his place? Her hands clenched into fists. "What if I offer myself?" she asked. "A Mercer for a Mercer. If I go willingly, does the ship survive?" For the first time, Alistair Cain hesitated. A silence fell over the ship, broken only by the howling wind. Then Cain nodded once. "A willing Mercer soul will suffice," he said. Margaret sobbed. "No, Eleanor, you can't." "It's the only way," Eleanor said, her voice firm. She turned to Edwin, kneeling in front of him. "You have to take care of your mother now," she whispered. Tears filled the boy's eyes. "Aunt Eleanor, please." She placed a hand on his cheek. "You will live," she promised. "You will break this curse for good." Then, before anyone could stop her, Eleanor stepped forward, into the abyss. The black water embraced her like arms, pulling her down into the depths. The last thing she saw was Edwin's tear-streaked face. And then, everything went dark. The curse shatters. The moment Eleanor disappeared beneath the waves, the Lillian's grace shuddered violently, as if gasping for breath. Alistair Cain turned one final time, locking eyes with Edwin. "The sea remembers its bargains," he murmured. "You are free, for now." Then, like mist in the morning sun, he vanished. The storm ceased, the waters calmed, the sky cleared, and the Lillian's grace remained afloat. Margaret collapsed onto the deck, sobbing, clutching her son. Eleanor was gone. But the ship, the crew, were saved. The silent horizon. For 3 more days, the Lillian's grace drifted in silence, the surviving crew too shaken to speak. Finally, the morning sun broke the endless night, and on the horizon, they saw it, land. Margaret held Edwin close as the ship, battered but still sailing, drifted toward shore. They had survived. But as Edwin looked out over the calm waters, he heard a whisper in the wind. "The sea does not forget." And he knew. The Mercer curse was not truly gone. It was simply waiting. The Lillian's grace finally reached land, an uncharted island with golden shores and dense jungle stretching beyond sight. The surviving crew, now fewer than 10, staggered onto the sand, collapsing in exhaustion. Margaret held Edwin close, her hands trembling as she whispered prayers of thanks. But Edwin's mind was elsewhere. His eyes lingered on the horizon, where the ocean stretched endlessly, silent, watchful. Though the sea had released them, he could still hear the whispers, the lingering echoes of the Black Harbinger. The debt had been paid, but had it truly ended? Echoes of the past days passed as the survivors built a temporary camp. They rationed what little supplies remained and explored the island for fresh water and food. The land was untouched, eerily silent, as if even nature itself dared not disturb what had transpired. At night, Edwin lay awake, listening to the sounds of the jungle. But beyond the chirps of insects and the rustling of leaves, he sometimes heard a voice calling his name, a voice that sounded like Eleanor's. "Edwin." One night, unable to resist, Edwin left the camp, stepping carefully into the jungle. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the sand. Then, near a small rocky cove, he saw her, Eleanor. She stood at the water's edge, her long dress billowing in the ocean breeze, her figure almost transparent beneath the moonlight. "Aunt Eleanor!" Edwin gasped, running toward her. She turned to him, her face solemn but kind. "You must listen to me," she said softly. "The sea has let you go, but only for now." Edwin's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "You paid the debt. Why isn't it over?" Eleanor's form shimmered. "Because the sea never forgets," she whispered. "The Mercer name is still tied to the waters. One day, it will call again." Edwin shook his head. "Then tell me how to break it forever." Eleanor hesitated. The waves whispered around her. "There is only one way," she admitted. "The Mercer line must never return to the sea. As long as one of us sails, the curse will live on." Edwin clenched his fists. "Then I won't. I'll never set foot on a ship again." Eleanor gave him a sad smile. "You say that now," she murmured. "But the sea calls to us, Edwin, and one day it will call to you." With that she began to fade, dissolving into mist. Edwin tried to reach for her, but she was already gone. Only the whispers of the waves remained. A new beginning? By the time Edwin returned to camp, the sun was beginning to rise. He never told Margaret or the others what he had seen, but he carried Eleanor's warning in his heart. Days later, a passing merchant ship discovered their camp and brought them safely back to England. The Mercer family buried their dead and rebuilt their name, but they never rebuilt their fleet. The days of Mercer ships ruling the sea were over. Years passed, and Edwin grew into a man, inheriting the wealth of his father. But despite his riches, he never set foot on a ship again. And for a time it seemed the curse had been broken. But deep down, Edwin knew. It was only sleeping. Years passed. Edwin Mercer grew into a man of wealth and influence, but he never sailed again. His mother, Margaret, raised him in a world far from the sea, in grand estates where the sound of waves could never reach him. Yet, no matter how far he ran, the ocean always lingered in his dreams. Every night, he dreamt of the Lillian's grace, drifting upon a moonlit sea. He dreamt of the Black Harbinger, its tattered sails whispering his name. And most of all, he dreamt of Eleanor, standing on the shore, waiting. One day, it will call to you. The Forbidden Letter. One evening, as Edwin sat in his study, an old Mercer family document was delivered to him, an inheritance from a distant relative he had never met. Inside the package was a letter written in his father's handwriting. "To my son, Edwin, I knew the curse would not end with me. I hoped you would never need to know the truth, but if you are reading this, then the sea has begun to call you back. The Mercers have tried to escape it for generations, but we never can. The ocean does not forget. It only waits. There is a way to end it, but it is dangerous. Somewhere beyond the farthest reaches of any map lies a place called the Drowned City. It is said to be where all lost souls of the sea go, where the Black Harbinger was born. If one of our bloodlines sails there and offers themselves to the deep, the curse will be severed forever. But no Mercer has ever returned from that journey. If you choose to run, I will not blame you. But if you choose to fight, then know that you will not be alone. The sea will always watch you, Edwin, and one day it will claim what it is owed." The final decision. Edwin sat in silence, staring at the letter. He had spent his whole life running from the sea, but now it had come for him. For weeks, he fought the urge to act, but the whispers grew louder, the shadows in the water deepened. Eleanor's voice called to him in the wind. One day, it will call to you. Finally, Edwin made his choice. With a heavy heart, He sold his land and gathered a small, loyal crew. He commissioned a ship, one that would sail into legend and oblivion alike. He named it Eleanor's Mercy. The journey to the drowned city. On a cold autumn morning, Edwin stood at the helm of his new ship. The crew, silent and wary, cast worried glances at their captain. They had all heard rumors of the Mercer curse, but gold and loyalty had bought their oaths. For the first time in years, Edwin felt the deck of a ship beneath his boots. The ocean welcomed him like an old friend. As Eleanor's Mercy cut through the waves, the world seemed to shift around them. Stars began to misalign. The sky grew darker even at midday. The sun no longer warmed their skin. Days turned into weeks, but no land appeared. Then the fog rolled in. It was the same unnatural mist that had surrounded the Lillian's grace so long ago. Thick, suffocating, absolute. The crew grew restless. Food spoiled within hours. The ship's clock froze at midnight. And then, on the 12th night, the bell tolled. A deep, resounding chime that rippled through the ocean itself. They had arrived. The drowned city. The fog parted, revealing a place no map had ever recorded. The drowned city rose from the black water like a corpse breaking the surface. Its towers crumbled, its streets swallowed by the sea. A place long forgotten, yet still alive with whispers. And there, at its center, a ship awaited. The Black Harbinger. It was as Edwin had seen it in his dreams. Torn sails, rotting wood, a ghostly crew standing motionless upon its deck. And at the helm, Alistair Cain waited. "You have come at last, Mercer." His voice echoed like a whisper between dimensions. Edwin stepped forward, his heart steady. "I have come to end this." Cain's skeletal grin widened. "Have you?" The ocean shuddered beneath them. The city groaned, its stones shifting, as if it was breathing. Edwin turned to his crew. "Leave now. Take the ship and go." None of them hesitated. They knew there was no place for them in this fight. As Eleanor's Mercy drifted away into the fog, Edwin faced Cain alone. "The final bargain. The Mercer line must end," Cain rasped. "Only then will the curse be broken." Edwin clenched his fists. "Then take me. Let the others live." Cain stepped forward, his shadow stretching unnaturally. "I accept." The water rose violently, engulfing the drowned city in its final breath. The Black Harbinger began to sink, dragged down into the abyss. And with it, Edwin Mercer disappeared beneath the waves. The sea remembers. The Eleanor's Mercy was never seen again. But the curse? It was over. For the first time in centuries, the sea was silent. Margaret, who had lived long enough to hear rumors of Edwin's fate, never spoke of him again. She died believing her son had sacrificed himself to break the curse, that he was finally at peace. And for a time, it seemed to be true. The Mercer name faded from maritime history. No ships were built, no fleets commanded. The family turned away from the ocean entirely. But sailors say that on the darkest nights, when the waters are eerily still, a ship can be seen drifting across the horizon. Its sails are tattered, its crew shadowed, and at the helm stands a lone figure. Not Alistair Cain, but Edwin Mercer, bound not by curse, but by duty. For someone must always keep the sea in check. And so, the last Mercer captain sails still, across the endless tides. A guardian of the waves, the one who paid the debt. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stories like this, hit that like button and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And let me know on which topic you would like to see stories next. And check out these other stories you might enjoy. See you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.